This morning, I've already been mistaken for a presidential candidate. I was walking around and somebody thought I looked kind of official, and he asked if I worked here, and I said no, and he said, "You look official, you should run for president of the United States." So I appreciated that. I also have my wife Karen here, who's filming this today. Karen doesn't get to attend conferences with me very often, so this is a real treat, and we've been able to have a lot of fun this weekend. And there are a lot of advantages to having your spouse of 26 years travel with you. On the train over here, she looked at my hair and she said, "I think we forgot to trim your hair a little bit." And I said, "There are a lot of amazing people with funny looking hair out there." I said, "Look at Einstein." She looked at me and said, "You ain't no Einstein." So she keeps me grounded. She keeps me in reality. She also did something that I've never had done in my life either. She grabbed some powder out of her purse and she powdered my forehead and my nose before I came up here. So I hope that doesn't distract anybody. One of the most wonderful things about this weekend is we have 7 kids, and we left all of them at home, and we are thrilled about that. One of the kids we found out yesterday got sick. We have 2 college-age kids, twins, a boy and a girl, who are almost 22, and then we have kids all the way down to age 4. And we found out that one of the 8-year-old got sick yesterday, and we just said, "You college-age kids just take care of it. You just don't care. you guys just figure it out." So we're going to talk today about a few things. I can't walk around much. I'm kind of captive here, so forgive me for not getting a little bit more interactive with you, but this is great. Looks like I can see most everybody. You can see me okay. I'm going to tell you a few stories first, just short scenarios. 2 guys, Brian and Joe, started a company called Airbnb. Have you heard of Airbnb before? Are some of you using it this weekend? Probably so. It's pretty convenient. It's a way to use the internet to rent an overnight stay. Brian and Joe ran out of money. This was in 2008. They ran out of money pretty quickly and they didn't know what to do. They both had a design background, and so they decided to do something creative. They made boxes of cereal. This was in the election year. They made boxes of cereal. One of them was called Obama O's. The other one was called Captain McCain's. They sold them at the Democratic and Republican National Convention parties, and they made $30,000. This had nothing to do with their core business, but they did this, and it enabled them to have a little bit of money to go for a few more months. They ran out of that money a few months later, and they didn't have anything to eat, so they started eating their cereal. And after that kind of ran out, they decided we better actually raise some real money. So they went to an angel investor, a VC company in Silicon Valley, and they told him a story. Paul Graham was the gentleman that they met with. Paul said, "No, I don't think I want to invest in you. I don't really get this. I don't think this is going to work out. I don't think this business model makes sense." And as they were about to leave, Brian pulled out his cereal box, and he told him his cereal box story. And Paul Graham said, "I like you. I'm going to invest in you." So they invested in their little startup. And do you know how much that business is worth now, what the market cap is on Airbnb? $25 billion. That's how much that business is valued right now. And they had to get a little bit creative to get that going and make it actually work. There's an artist in Chicago, his name is Theaster Gates. You may have heard of him. He bought an old abandoned bank building for $1 from the government, and he wanted to turn it into an art gallery. Nobody would fund him. He decided to get creative. He took the marble partitions from the urinals in the bathroom, cut them up into blocks, and engraved some etchings in there that made it look like bank bonds on these marble blocks. He took 100 of them to Switzerland, to an art festival, and sold all of them for $5,000 each, made $500,000, and created his art gallery. He got creative. In 1999, I was a VP of sales for a technology company, and we had $20 million investment from Deutsche Bank. We were at a very large trade show in New York, and I had already spent my budget on my 7 or 8 member enterprise sales team. And we were at our booth at Internet World, this trade show, and a woman walked up to our booth, and she had a badge on, much like our badges today. And on her badge, it said #1 salesperson. And she walked up to us and she started talking to us. And I had no interest in another salesperson. We had already obtained our sales team. Long story short, 3 weeks later, we gave Karen Link an offer and gave her a $20,000 signing bonus. She got creative to find a job. These are examples of innovation. I want to tell you one more. In World War II, the tanks were not able to breach the hedgerows. You know what a hedgerow is? A hedgerow is a very long strip of dense vegetation that is very hard to get across for a tank or anything else in France. The soldiers decided they would get creative. They took the very obstacles that the Germans put in their way, these metal crosses of metal, and they took them apart and they put them on the bottom front of the tanks like teeth, and they were able to get through those hedgerows, and that solved their problem. They got creative. All these people were innovators. You are all innovators in this room. What is innovation? Innovation is really just problem solving, I think. I like word origins. The origin of the word, the etymology of the word innovation is to make new, make something new. And it really is problem solving. And the etymology of problem, the word problem, is to put forth. To put forth to a group to solve a problem, to find a solution. So here's my question, and here's why we're in this room right now. Here's what I'm talking about today. How do we codify making new? How do we codify problem solving? How do we codify innovation? How do we replicate it so it's not just a fluke? So it's not just a fluke that we decided to get some cereal boxes or make some blocks and go to Switzerland or to put a tag around our neck that says #1 salesperson. How do we replicate this so it happens over and over again? I think the first thing that we need to do is we need to talk about what a system is. We systematize that process. So what is a system? The dictionary definition of a system is a set of connected parts that form a complex whole. A set of connected parts that form a whole. I brought a highly sophisticated system in for you today. I was going to bring one of my kids' Lego ships, but I decided not to do that. I brought something much more sophisticated. It's my body. My body is, I think, probably the most sophisticated machine or system that we can imagine. And so is yours. Before I talk about my body a little bit more, let me talk about my son's body. He's 14 now. I told you we had 7 kids. Our 3rd child came to us via in vitro fertilization. And we had never experienced anything like that before. Before they implanted that little tiny microscopic embryo, they let me look at it through a microscope. I was able to look at this little cell. It was actually Karen told me the technical term. Karen's much smarter than me, and she gives me all kinds of great feedback and information. She said this was a 4-cell fertilized egg. Is that correct? Embryo. Okay. All right. And I looked at it, and it just looked like a little circle that with a cross in it, and it had 4 parts to it. It was a miracle. It was amazing. And that little kid now is a whiny teenager. With the sweet haircut, with the Macklemore, with the side shaved and the hair flopping over. But he's a good kid. Now, my body has an average of about 50 trillion cells in it. So that little embryo had a lot of splitting to do, didn't it? 50 trillion cells. You all have about the same. 50 trillion cells in your body, between 30 and maybe 80 trillion. So a system is how do all these cells work to make a body that is a whole system that can do cool things? It's kind of an amazing process. So in order to talk about that, let's go a little bit deeper on what a system is. Let's talk about those 2 pieces of that definition, connected and formed. Let's talk about connected. If you look at a microscope and if you drill down further and further and further on the individual parts of our bodies, what you'll find is that you cannot actually measure an individual particle in isolation. You can't measure it by itself. It has to be measured as it interacts with something else, in relation to something else. It actually is a little pulse of energy that's interacting with other pulses of energy. Oh, I actually do have one thing I want to read. This is a cool poem, you probably heard of it. So everything's connected. All these cells are connected. We in this room are a system and we're all connected. That's not part of the poem. Here's the poem. No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manner of thy friends, or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. We're all completely entangled. We can't get away from it. It's important to talk about systems when we talk about innovation, because you can't analyze a problem without looking at the system that it's a part of. So let's talk about the other piece of this definition of the system. It's called form. So form, interesting to me, form is the root of the word information. Information helps us form systems. The only thing that is keeping my body together is information. The instructions in my cells, the instructions in my DNA. Did you know that the 50 trillion cells in my body have ears on them? I don't think they look like my ears or your ears, but they have receptors and they receive communication, they receive information. Did you know that my body has regenerated several times? Like I have a completely new body than when I started with. My body is transient, so is yours. It regenerates. The only thing that is consistent with that is the information that tells your body what to do. So we have this idea of being connected and information. Information is going to be a very big theme to this presentation I have today. So let's keep that in mind for a minute, and I'll talk a little bit more about a few other things here. There is a massive pressure bearing down on all of you. Can you feel it? I can feel it. It's called flux. There's a guy in 500 BC named Heraclitus, who's a philosopher. He was one of the first people to talk about flux. Flux, really, the word origin of flux is flow. He said, no man can step into the same river twice. Think about that. No man can step into the same river twice. Because that river is constantly flowing. The minute you step into it, more water flows right over it. He said everything moves. Everything flows. If you think about that, really, it's hard to imagine anything that doesn't move. Flow and motion and movement is life. Stagnation is the opposite. So Heraclitus talked to us a little bit about flux. Now, there are two parts to flux. One is called entropy, and the other is called uncertainty. Entropy and uncertainty. We were down by the Golden Gate Bridge last night. I'm serious, we've had a great time this weekend. It has been such a blast. Last night we went to an old Presbyterian church and we saw multiple denominations of religions do a choral concert to benefit the homeless. And I cried a little bit, I will confess. Because I felt that unity. So we were down by the Golden Gate Bridge and I saw a woman with a shirt on that says, entropy happens. I thought that was kind of relevant to my conversation today. Entropy happens. Let's talk about what entropy is first. Okay, entropy are the two parts to flux. Entropy is the second law of thermodynamics, which is the law of disorder. We all know it very well, don't we? I remember the first time that I learned about the second law of thermodynamics. It was in college physical science class. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention in high school to physical science class stuff. In college I did. I remember when the professor started talking about entropy, I was kind of riveted. What that means is, if there is not pressure applied to something, it will tend toward disorder. If you take a boiling pot of water off the stove, it will naturally cool, won't it? If you take ice out of the freezer, it'll naturally melt. Having 7 kids, we know entropy well. The minute we clean up that living room, we turn around, and it looks like a drunken frat party came in, and trashed it. It's amazing how it works. If we didn't do anything, if we just stayed here in this room and we just stared at each other for the next 2 weeks, we would probably pass away. We wouldn't last very long, would we? So what I want to do is try a little exercise. For 10 minutes, we're going to stare at each other and do nothing. Ready, go. Okay, I can't wait for 10 minutes. That's too long. But even a few seconds is kind of awkward, isn't it? We're used to moving. And even when we spent those few seconds freezing for a minute, we still had millions and trillions of things going on inside our body that was moving around and doing things to keep us alive. So entropy, law of disorder, we have to have pressure. We have to have work that will counteract that. I have learned firsthand recently a little bit about entropy, where I have gained a few pounds because I haven't been working hard enough. Brett Townsend told me this morning that he had a good workout, and I felt a little jealous because I didn't work out this morning. I need to work out more. I noticed this a few weeks ago because all of my clothes were getting tighter, and I told Karen, I said, something's going on with the clothes. I said that it must be something in the detergent. It's making all my clothes tighter. And she said, I don't think it's in the detergent. I think it might be something in the fridge. And I think she's right. Something in the fridge is making my clothes tighter. So we did innovate, though. Karen one time brought me home, not too long ago, my first pair of stretchy pants. Which, this is life-changing. This really is life-changing. When I first met Karen, I was a size 28 waist. Can you believe that? I was just a baby. 28 waist. And then I went to a 30 and a 32, and I started getting worried. And then I went to a 34, and I got more worried. And then I went to a 36, and I promised Karen I would never go past a 36. I promised myself that. And I'm dangerously close to a 38 right now, but with stretchy pants. My tag still says 36. So I'm not admitting it yet. I like to say I like pants that will flex with my flux. That's my slogan. So we have entropy. Now let's talk about uncertainty. Have you heard of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle? It's pretty interesting. There's a lot of stuff we can learn from quantum mechanics, the study of the subatomic world, the microscopic world. There's a lot of stuff we can learn about that world that helps us with our relationships and our systems and innovation. So uncertainty says, the law of uncertainty, and the cool thing too about quantum mechanics and physics is that these people back up their theories with math, which is great. Really tough math. Einstein level math. And so, uncertainty, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle says that you cannot actually nail down the measurement of an individual particle. Either you're going to know its momentum or you're going to know its location, but you can't know both. Think about that for a second. You can't nail it down. You cannot measure with precision both the location and the momentum of an individual particle. That's the uncertainty principle. And it applies to us. We know that things are happening all the time that cause uncertainty and surprises in our lives. I coach baseball. I coach youth baseball. I love it. I have a whole half a day's worth of anecdotes from my baseball coaching because these kids say some funny things and they do some funny things. But just this past season, the second baseman, and these are 8-year-old kids, the second baseman was doing some kind of picking daisies a little bit. And, these kids, sometimes they turn around the opposite direction from the batter, and they actually take their glove off and put it on their head, or they sit down and they draw in the dirt. And I told the second baseman, I said, hey, watch out. The ball's coming. It's coming right to you. And he looked at me and he said, you don't know that. And then he said, you can't predict the future. And he was right, wasn't he? I can't predict the future. One time I told a kid, remember now, when you get to first base, you can practice. When you get into a game, the game is a totally different thing, isn't it? I reminded the kid, when you get to first base, you got to keep running. If the first base coach tells you to keep running, you keep running. He got to first base and he kept running straight out to the outfield. Come on back. No, you got to take a left. It's uncertainty. It happens everywhere. We were tucking our little 6-year-old boy, and I think he was younger than that. I think he was like 2 or 3, into bed a few years ago. And Karen said, he's a cute little guy. His name is Braden. This is the only kid we've done this with. We nicknamed him Scrumptious because he's just like a little scrumptious, teddy bear. You just want to just squeeze him. He's fat little, cute little kid, And we were tucking him in, and Karen said, "Who do you love?" And he said, "Mommy." And I wanted to get my turn for some love, and I said, "Who else do you love?" And he looked at me and he said, "SpongeBob." This is uncertainty. I didn't expect this. We were we had a new neighbor move in. He was watering his lawn. We were on our way to church. Had the whole crew in our Suburban going to church. This is another kid, and I wanted to. I had plans to meet this person. Maybe even invite him to a little neighborhood activity. Maybe invite him to church. I hadn't met him yet. And we were driving to church, and in the back window, my 6-year-old boy. This is a different kid. He rolled down the window, and as loud as he could, as we were passing by this guy, he said, "See you later, sucker." These things happen all the time, don't they? So these things happen in your life. Does entropy happen? Does uncertainty happen? It's called flux. So let's think of this metaphor now. Think of a great, big, scary sea monster. It has to be a sea monster for this metaphor. It's a sea monster with 2 heads. The 2 heads of this sea monster are entropy and uncertainty, and the sea monster is called flux, okay? And the sea monster has a big staff in his hand, and he slaps that staff down. He's huge. He's way out of the water. He slaps that staff onto the ocean, and he creates a wave. That's his weapon. He creates a flux wave. And it comes at us. And if we're not prepared for these flux waves, we get tumbled in the sea. Have you ever been in the ocean and you got tumbled by a wave? I was fortunate to go to Hawaii for junior high. I'm from Alaska. I grew up in Alaska. Karen grew up in Los Angeles. And we had a 3,000-acre plot of wilderness land that my dad is an entrepreneur, and he cleared the land, and we did that for a few years and sold it. Part of the deal was that we would get a condo in Hawaii when we sold it. The buyer had a condo in Hawaii. And so we lived above Pearl Ridge Shopping Center, above Pearl Harbor. And I was one of 4 Howleys in my junior high. And it was a great experience. Loved it. Played football in junior high, and those Hawaiians love their football. And the beautiful thing about Hawaii is I learned how to survive in these waves that would tumble over me. But I got tumbled down quite a few times. So what happens when you get into these flux waves, when a wave hits you, is your reality starts to change. Now this is an important part of this conversation today. Changing reality. Did you know that truth actually changes? It was a fact that Pluto was a planet, and now Pluto's not a planet. Truth changes. Flux happens. Reality changes. Did you know that our reality actually becomes encrypted? Minute by minute, second by second, our reality changes. Our environment changes. The root of the word environment, where that word origin, is environ. Environ means circle. Environment is everything that we perceive. It's the physical surrounding and the social surrounding, spiritual surrounding. It's our environment. Our environment actually changes second by second, minute by minute. If we're not aware of that change in reality, then we can become confused. We can get tumbled in that wave. There are a lot of examples of this. The husband who doesn't check in with their wife for 6 or 12 months or a couple of years and realizes that the wife is about ready to walk away because she feels lonely in the relationship. This is getting sideswiped or blindsided by the flux wave. It's the father or the mother who doesn't check in with their child after a couple of years. They go 12, 13, 14, age 15, and realize that they're a different person and that they're off in the weeds. Our reality changes. It's the CEO that thought that their product was in good shape, and come to find out the competition created a new feature and stole 3 of their biggest customers. This is how reality changes for us. We've had a lot of alternate realities in politics this year. I don't want to get too political right now or choose sides right now. But I think both candidates, Trump and Hillary, both have their share of alternate realities. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that debate tonight. It almost seems like we're used to it now. It almost seems like we're used to living in a kind of an alternate reality, a reality that is kind of false. And so we have to be careful, because when you live in a false reality, even if it's minor, just like when Karen and I found out yesterday that our child was sick, our reality had changed. Just a little bit. And if we're not careful, then we can make bad decisions. In the book Good to Great, there's a great example of the prisoners of war. And Admiral Stockdale, who won the Medal of Honor for his heroism as a POW, he said that the ones that survived were the ones that were able to, quote, face the brutal facts, but never give hope in the end. Face the brutal facts, but never give hope in the end, but never give up hope in the end. So here's what happens. Let's go back to information real quick. Here's what happens with our changing reality. Information breaks down. We lose information. We forget things. And remember, information is what binds all these systems. Where are the other systems that we operate in? In this room, we're a system. Families are systems. Right when I graduated from high school, I joined the Marines. That was an amazing experience. And we were a system in the Marines. I was young for my grade, and so when I joined the Marines, I was only 17. I was just a teenager. My peers were also 17, 18, 19 years old. And at first, when we went to boot camp, they called us a mob. That was the word for us. We were a mob. They would say, "Go mob, stop mob, turn left mob," because we did not have the right information to communicate with each other. We didn't know how to be a system. We spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on the drill field learning how to march. At the time, I didn't understand, why are we learning how to march so much? Don't we need to learn how to shoot guns and play war? What I realized at the end of that is that we were a completely synced up, connected system. And one of the most beautiful sounds that I can remember from those days is the sound of 70 boots hitting the deck at the same time as we were marching in perfect synchronicity. We became a system. That's our goal. That's our goal as teams, as groups, as systems, as family, as work units, is to have that synchronicity. And the only way we can do that is to stay on top of our reality as it changes. Now, I'm not going to finish yet. I do need a clock, though, to make sure I don't, because I could talk about this for a while, because I really like this subject. 9:39, I have till 10 o'clock, is that right? Okay. I'm not going to leave you hanging with this flux monster. I actually have a solution. We're going to talk about that now. And we're going to talk about some tactical things that we can do. It's not just theory today. We're going to talk about some tactical things that we can do as well. So the nice thing about flux is that it actually helps us. We can't live without opposition. It's the yin and the yang, right? We have to have them both. We can't live without opposition. We have to, in order to have happy, we have to have sad. In order to have joy, we have to have the opposite. We have to have it. So flux actually makes us better. Have you heard that? Have you felt that? Have you seen how adversity makes us stronger? Have you seen how competition makes us better? So the idea is not to eliminate flux, it's to ride the flux wave. In fact, flux can be has great capacity to help us do great things. So I have a solution for us to ride the wave. I call it the flux capacitator. You may have heard that term before. It's, I think Back to the Future use, I think they got it from me. But I never thought in the 80s when I watched Back to the Future that I could use the word flux capacitator in a professional setting. But here I am. So a flux capacitor is really a surfboard. You want to get on your surfboard and ride that flux wave. And the surfboard is called dialogue. So now we're going to talk, now I'm kind of bringing this home now. We're going to talk about dialogue a little bit. So dialogue may not be what you think it is. the word origin for dialogue is dia and then log, right? So what does dia mean? I thought it meant two. It doesn't mean two. What does it mean? The MIT study showed that the groups that they were trying to analyze the intelligence of different groups, they gave them tasks to see if they accomplished these tasks and who would do the best at them. The ones that did the best were the ones that had the most participation among the group members, the most interaction, the most dialogue. And interestingly, the other thing that they said was a correlator, highly correlated to the winner, the most intelligent teams, was that women were on the team. Why is that? We've known for a long time that women are the superior, and I'm not just saying that because Karen's here. They said that the reason that that's the case is because women are more intuitive and are more observant with social cues. Does that resonate? Have you seen that? Just in general, we don't want to be too generalizing today or stereotypical, but they said that the women were able to pick up the social cues better, and so that helped them. So the groups that are able to have interaction with their environment are the ones that are able to be smarter. Jack Welch, the famed CEO of GE, who took it from 12 billion to 300 billion, I would think that when you're at 12 billion and you go to 15 or 20 billion, you're probably good to go. You know? He took it to 300 billion. I think the stock price rose, I think the stock value rose by something like 10,000% in those 20 years. It's just amazing what he did. You know what he said? He said, you can take all the other leadership stuff and you can just blow it away, and it comes down to one thing. Truth. He said trust and truth. But he said trust to get to truth. So let me say that again. He said you can take everything else and just forget about it. As long as you can get truth out of your team, then you're in good shape. But what happens is flux causes confusion. And it happens in all systems. So we need this dialogue. So what I want to say is, and I was thinking about doing this, but I didn't do it. What I'd like to do, I've never been an activist with a sign, holding a sign up, you know? I don't know if any of you have ever done that. I was going to plant some signs in the audience, and I was going to bring one too. And the sign was going to say, free the information. And so I was envisioning everybody in here. It's way too early to do this, and I'm not going to ask you to do this. But I was envisioning everybody in here chanting, free the information, free the information, free the information. Because that's what we're trying to do. What happens in a system is the information gets clogged up. And it happens all the time. It happens every minute. Right now, you're away from your families. Your family's getting clogged up right now. Your work team's getting clogged up right now because hopefully you're learning enough to compensate for that. Hopefully when you get out of here, you're going to be able to unclog whatever information got clogged up in the past hour in here. But it's happening right now as we speak. I don't want to scare you, but it's happening. It's kind of like cholesterol in the body. It's stopping the flow of information. We have to unclog those arteries. So I have an acronym. You can't get away with a speech like this without an acronym. And I wanted to give you one today so that you can remember a few things. Because Karen said they're not going to remember anything that you say to you. They're going to remember how you feel, how they feel. And so I hope you remember a couple things. And I hope that also you can remember a few things with this acronym I'm going to give you. So this is in order for you to surf the flux wave and to discover truth. The acronym is DISCOVER. And it stands for the following. Dare to experiment. Install information sharing channels. That's I. S is safety. Make it safe. I'm going to go through these in a second. C is control the tempo. Control the tempo. O is observe. Be observant, be aware, high situational awareness. V is verify and clarify. E is emotions. Control your emotions, manage them, regulate them. R is relentlessly revise and retry. This is dialogue. This is how to discover truth in a changing environment so that you can unclog that information. What happens when you're able to actually do this is you're able to be, now think of what, does anybody surf? Does anybody really surf in here? Anybody surf? You really surf? Excellent. Okay, so I've tried it a few times, lived in Hawaii, lived in California for a little while. It's not easy. You have to have good balance. And you have to have agility. So I'm assuming, since you're a true surfer, that you have agility. You're able to get up on that surfboard and in an agile way, surf that flux wave. That's what it's called when we actually implement discover or dialogue to leverage that wave, because we have agility. So let's talk about dare to experiment. What's my time check? 9:49. Just, I think we got plenty of time here. Those first 4 examples I gave you when I started this, remember the guy who made the blocks and went to Switzerland, and the guys who made the cereal, and those guys, the lady who had the #1 salesperson? What did they do? They dared to experiment. So interacting with your environment is not just words. Dialogue isn't just words, it's actions as well. If we can dare to experiment, we're going to get feedback. And we're very familiar with the lean startup movement. As we iterate and we get feedback, we get smarter quicker. So we are a smarter system and a smarter team. Install information sharing channels. Meg Whitman of eBay fame went over to HP and found when she got there that the executive team was holed up in a silo, in a bunker, in their own building with literally barbed wire around it. You know what the first thing that Meg did? She kicked all the executives. I read about this in the book, The Power of Habit. Has anybody heard about that book? Pretty cool book. The CEO of Alcoa took over, and they weren't doing very well. They had a lot of safety issues. And he stood up there in front of all the stockholders, and they were expecting him to talk about a bunch of charts and profit and all this boring stuff. And he said, I'm only going to focus on safety. That's all I'm going to focus on. And so the first thing that they did, they thought he was some kind of a hippie, some kind of a crazy guy to do that. But there were actually deaths in their plants around the world. So they installed some new safety measures, and you know what he told his people? He said, if any of these safety measures get breached, I want you to tell your supervisor. If your supervisor doesn't listen to you, I want you to email me. If you can't get through on an email, I want you to call my cell phone. I don't know how many people Alcoa has, 50,000 people, 100,000 people. He gave everybody permission to call his cell phone. That's opening up the information channels. Another example at home, having a one-on-one with your son, or your daughter, or your wife. How about date night? Do we spend time with our partners on date night to actually have some time together to actually get reacquainted without all the distractions? We have to drill down. We have to see what's inside there. We have to open up those information channels. Recently, I did a one-on-one with my 14-year-old in vitro kid, and we talked about things. I like to ask very direct questions, verify and clarify. I like to verify and clarify with my kids a lot. So I asked him, how are you doing with your music? Is your music appropriate? Is it okay? How are you doing with your images? Are you seeing any inappropriate images? And he said, he's doing okay. Then our reality changes and we get blindsided. So let's open up the information sharing channels. Make it safe. I consulted for a number of years. I consulted for a company just recently, and the CEO would bring everybody together and said, I want feedback. And then he would get feedback, and then he would just nail the person who gave the feedback. He would nail him to the wall and make him feel this big. That's not making it safe, is it? We talk about making it safe, but we don't do it. We have to really make it safe. We have to elicit feedback. We have to draw it out. We have to be strong enough and courageous enough to take it when it comes as well. I was consulting for another company, and the CEO and the leadership team, one of their stated values was being blunt. That's actually what's called being blunt. Blunt's okay as long as you still feel safe, but it needs to go all the way around. Other people need to feel like they can be blunt as well, or at least express their opinion. And one of the things that they said often in their meetings, when somebody would make a comment, and they would do it kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it really wasn't, they would say, ooh, that was kind of a career-limiting comment you just made. A career-limiting comment. Does that make it safe to communicate? If we don't make it safe for our kids and our partners and our work teams and our sports teams and our military teams, if we don't make it safe for them to communicate, guess what? You get information that is withholded. It's called withholding information. Can you make a good decision if vital information is being withheld? Gettysburg, Robert E. Lee was a genius general. But he lost the Battle of Gettysburg before it even started. Do you know why? Has anyone been to the Gettysburg site? It's a neat place. Karen, I think, just went there recently. His main general that was supposed to give him information, intelligence on the troop strength and movement of the Union forces didn't come through for him. So by the time he got to Gettysburg, he had all the low ground, and in the Civil War especially, he wanted the high ground. And the Union forces got the high ground. And in that last battle, Lee's right-hand man, General Longstreet, he pleaded with him, he begged with him not to go up that hill and do that last attack. He knew it was suicide, but Lee had to do it for whatever reason. He did it, and they lost almost all their troops, and that was really the turning point of the Civil War. But they lost that battle before they started it. Sun Tzu, the great general, he says the most important thing in battle is information. You get the good information and you deceive the other team, the enemy. General Lee did not have the good information. So, information channels, safety. Let's go to control the tempo. Control the tempo. Back in last year, did anybody watch that national championship college football game between Alabama and Clemson? That was a pretty exciting game. Alabama was losing it. Clemson has an amazing quarterback. I think he's on the list for Heisman Trophy this year. But Nick Saban's no dummy, the head coach at Alabama. He saw that he was losing the tempo battle, the momentum battle. So he did something kind of crazy. If this hadn't worked, he would have looked like not very smart. But it worked, and he looked like a genius. He did an onside kick, and I think it was in the third quarter. Usually you save that for the very end to do an onside kick as a last-ditch effort. He did it in the third quarter, which means that when you kick it off, if you can get it at least 10 yards away, then your own team can actually recover it and you can hold on to the ball. He did this, and it worked perfectly. And it completely changed the tempo of the game, and they won that national championship. And I believe, in my opinion, that was the thing that won it for him, is that controlling that tempo. After Muhammad Ali passed away, I watched the whole fight between him and Foreman in Zaire. What was that called? Rumble in the Jungle. Who said that? Thank you. Rumble in the Jungle. I was thinking Thriller in Manila, but Manila's not in Africa, right? That was another one. Rumble in the Jungle. I watched the whole thing. It was genius what Muhammad Ali did. The guy was so smart. And he gave us some pretty good one-liners too, you gotta admit. They thought that Foreman was going to destroy him. Ali was a lot older than Foreman, and Foreman was just a monster. So you know what Ali did? For most of the fight, and he started this, he called it rope-a-dope. And he got on the ropes, and he went like this, and he let Foreman just expend all of his energy for about 7 or 8 rounds. The whole time. Every once in a while, when Foreman would stop punching, he'd give him a little jab. And then just take it, jab, take it, jab. For 7 or 8 rounds. Guess what happened to Foreman after 7 or 8 rounds? Exhausted. Ali was controlling the tempo. He was